Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing an updated Sona guide for Season 8. So I did do a Sona guide probably about 3 or 4 months ago for Season 8, but the meta has shifted quite a lot. So Megan donated to have this guide prepared. So thank you very much to Megan. I really appreciate it. Also have another guide coming up for Megan soon about Ashe. They are making some significant AD carry changes here in a few days on patch 8.15. At least that's what they're talking about on the PvE. So I'm going to wait, watch those drop, and then I should have an Ashe guide up sometime over the next few days after that information comes out. But let's focus on Sona here. Okay, so Sona had fallen out of the meta. She was really strong early on in the season, in Season 8. Primarily because she synergized really well with a lot of the runes. Most notably, Aerie and Scorch were both extremely powerful on her because she could spam a lot of that harassment in lane, and then Aerie also doubled as just a really easy, repeatable shield later on. So she was this really insane combination of very, very high power early on, and then very, very good scaling later on. But they ended up nerfing her several times. Now, the main Sona wiki here has been down for me. I've been waiting on this, reloading it, doing everything I can to get it to load. So I can't use the main wiki that I have linked here. It might work on your computer. Maybe they're just doing some maintenance or something here as of July 29th when I'm making this. But I did go to League's main page here, and I believe all of these stats are updated. So this gives us most of the information that we're going to be talking about here. And then I was able to access the history page on the League wiki, so we can talk about how she was changed or nerfed. By the way, I forgot to mention it, but you can also find access to this Google Doc we're going to be going over in the description, and you can find timestamps as well, so you can jump around to your favorite parts if you don't have time to watch the whole thing. If you like this guide, be sure to check out the rest of the content on the channel. I have a ton of other guides for champions. I stream every night starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have tons of coaching sessions. I think we have 120 on the channel. We do tier lists every patch for support, AD carry, and I'm going to start doing more tier lists as well. So just tons and tons of content always coming out on the channel. So be sure to check it out, The Strategy Professor on YouTube. And if you watch a few different videos on the channel and you really like the content, you want to help us out, go ahead and hit that like, hit that subscribe. It does help other people find the channel and enjoy the same kind of content that I hope you're going to enjoy as well. Okay, so this is what I was talking about early on, just to kind of put a bow on where Sona is right now in the meta and sort of where she's been over the course of Season 8 so far. So this is where she got nerfed a lot, a whole lot. I mean, she got nerfed. Everybody got that nerf on 722, but on... Actually, no, maybe that was just her. I can't remember. They did nerf everybody's armor at one point, except for the tanks, and they like buffed their health or something. It's compensation. But either way... it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Basically 8 nerfs in a row on Sona over the first, 3 patches of the season or so. She was so strong. So the biggest ones were the nerf to her Q. They hit her mana cost a lot early on. Actually, that was a buff. I take that back. That was a buff. So they reverted the nerf there on 8-2. So 7 nerfs in a row and then one sort of compensatory buff there. But they nerfed the on-hit damage. They cut it in half off of the Q, which is significant because if you touch 5 different people with this, it used to do 300 damage, and now it only does 150, which is a lot. And then they increased the AP ratio, but to make up for that, that extra 10% there, you'd have to have 300 AP just to break even on this. So that's definitely a big nerf. And then the nerf to her W doesn't seem as large, but early on it kind of is. You're losing 5 healing there, but when the base is only 30, that's kind of rough. And then the shield was also reduced by 5. So that was kind of the state of Sona early on. So she went from being like super overpowered to just kind of okay. And part of the product of why she was really good too was it was a tank meta. There were tons of tanks. Anytime you have a healer and shielder as a support, they're going to be much stronger in a tank meta than they will be in most other metas, most notably like an assassin meta. And the reason for that is plus healing and shielding scales with armor. People oftentimes don't realize that, but if you have 100 armor, that's going to block 50% of incoming damage coming your way. So if you have 100 health and 100 armor, it's going to take 200 damage to cut through that 100 health, right? Because it's going to be reduced by 50%. The same also applies to shields. So if you give somebody a 100 shield and they have 100 armor, then it's going to take 200 damage to cut through that shield. To do the equivalent of 100 damage to the person, right, after the 50% reduction. And so that's part of why a lot of the shield champions were nerfed over time, is because the stat plus healing and shielding, because it works with armor and magic resist, is extremely powerful. So a lot of champions, and this includes Sona, they have AP ratios in their kits, right? So her W has an AP ratio and her Q has an AP ratio. But then also she benefits from the stat plus healing and shielding, which compounds multiplicatively with the AP, and then that also compounds with the resistances on the person. So it's like triple scaling. So let me give you an example of this, just to kind of put a number on this. And let's just use some simple numbers here. Let's just say that you have somebody that has a shield that gives 200 shield, right? So you've got your 200 shield, and let's say it has a 0.5 AP ratio, just for easy math, and you have 100 AP. Okay, so now you have 200 plus 50. Okay, so that's 250 shield now. Okay, pretty standard. You know, most other AP champions in the game have that. But now you have an additional stat which gives you an extra percentage increase of that. So if you have plus healing and shielding, let's say that you have plus 20% healing and shielding, then you do times 1.2. Okay, so now we're at 300. And let's say that you're putting that shield on somebody that has 100 armor. The damage is going to be reduced by 50% from physical sources, so they're going to need to deal twice as much damage. So times 2, 600. So now that initial shield that was only 200, through some pretty easy stats, right? Just 100 AP with a 0.5 ratio, which is really light. Just 20% plus healing and shielding, and just a champion that has 100 armor. It takes 600 damage to cut through that. So it's basically 3 times the power of that 200 shield. So that's why when somebody looks like they have a little small shield, that it takes forever to kill the thing, or that the shields end up looking massive on some champions, is because of that scaling. And that's some of the highest scaling in the game. It's because it works with resistances, right? Because it takes that 600 damage. By contrast, if you were trying to deal 100 damage, physical damage, you're going to be going through the armor, right? Whereas the armor helps you when you heal and shield. So that's what makes enchanters really, really good, because it's going to scale much harder if you are healing or shielding somebody that has, 100 armor versus somebody that has 50 armor, right? Like an assassin that's running around or something like that. Also, the longer fights go on, the more that you get to cast more and more heals and shields, and the more that you get to take advantage of this multiplicative effect, right? Whereas if you're a damage dealer, you want the fight to be over fast a lot of the time, so that they don't have time to... Because a lot of champions, especially assassins, they have one rotation that's a lot of burst. And if they don't kill you in that rotation, they have really long cooldowns. But a lot of these healers and shielders, especially once they start getting a lot of CDR, a lot of their abilities are going to be on like 6 second or less cooldown, and they're going to be replenishing all of this stuff. So that's why champions like Sona, Janna, Soraka, all of these champions typically want longer fights, which means tanks and a slower meta in general where people don't snowball. Okay, so that was quite a lot of the season, honestly. And enchanters, people were still crying about enchanters being strong, and this is where we're kind of getting into new territory. I'm just talking historically and theoretically about Sona over like the first half of Season 8. But since my initial guide, they have made some changes to the game. So one of the big ones is they nerfed a lot of the other enchanters, right? So Janna was the biggest person that got whacked off of this. So they did nerf Janna a lot earlier in the preseason. They made her shield, the biggest one was her shield is an 18-second cooldown at level 1 versus 10 seconds. So she's very, very vulnerable in the landing phase. But then also they just recently changed the shield on her to where it decays over time. So now it still lasts 5 seconds, but it starts decaying like after 2 seconds. And so she loses a lot of efficiency on her shield. And then a lot of the other champions, their shield duration was just cut by a lot. So if you look at Lulu, her shield duration is only 2 seconds now instead of 6 seconds. I think Karma got the same treatment and Orianna got the same treatment. Now, a lot of times in a long fight, the shield's going to get broken in under 2 seconds, right? If it's a team fight and someone's taking a lot of damage. But that was a nerf. And then also they nerfed a lot of the plus healing and shielding items. Mikhail's was the biggest one to get hit because it went from 20% plus healing and shielding down to 15%. And then Redemption got dinged a little bit. It went from 10% to 8%. And then Ardent Censor got dinged a little bit, went from 10% to 8%. The biggest one was Mikhail's, though. And so any champion that really wanted to scale off of Mikhail's, like a Soraka or a Janna, really lost a lot out of that. But in compensation for that, and I'll go ahead and pull this, I think I've got the item listed here. Let's talk about Athene's here really quickly. This is something I think went under the radar a lot, and I talked about this when they buffed this up quite a bit. It went from 25% to 35% pre-mitigation damage dealt as blood charges. This item is insane on Sona. It's been very good for quite a while on Sona, but it has been overshadowed by Ardent Censor and by Redemption, over the last year or so. But arguably, Sona is the best Athene's user, or she's pretty close, because she puts out quite a bit of pre-mitigation damage by spamming her Q and her auto attacks, and then she also has a W that can heal people that's on a really low cooldown. It ends up being on like a 3-second cooldown after your CDR and your ult, which lowers your cooldown on your auras. So this item's extremely strong on her, and it went from 25% to 35%. I did a little math here for you as well when we're talking about these items. I'm kind of going out of sequence here for the timestamps, but whatever. I'm just going to mention it really quickly, and then we'll talk about it some more when we get down there. But just for a small example, level 3 Q is going to do somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 damage, right? If you just press Q and auto attack somebody. If we look at the stats here, level 3 Q, which typically you'll get about 3 points in lane, depending on how well you're harassing. So you're going to hit 2 people with it in a fight, so that's 200 damage. And then you're going to auto attack. So that's 220 damage. Then you're going to have some amount of, ability power in there, or some amount of, basically that ability power. And then you have your auto attack damage too. Don't forget the auto attack. It's not just your spells that deal damage with Athene's, it's your autos. So I don't know if we have her base stats here, but even if she does like 60 damage or something like that, you have 220 off the base, right? There we go. So you have 200, you're hitting 2 people with Q, you're hitting someone with your empowered thing, so that's 220. You're doing, let's just say, at least 60 damage with your auto attack, so that's 280. And then you're going to have enough ability power, probably almost off of runes even, just to deal an extra 20 damage. So I'm just calling it an even 300 damage, just for easy math. So you Q somebody in the mid-game around level, 5 or 6, it's going to do about 300 total damage. Now, pre-mitigation means that that's before magic resist is applied, before magic resist and armor are applied. So that means just whatever it would be if it was true damage, which is really, really important, because that makes this item way, way stronger than a lot of people initially think. So the fact that it's pre-mitigation, you do 300% or 300 damage pre-mitigation, it's 35% a pop. That's going to be 105 healing. 105 extra healing off of this. So you just press Q, and there's no cooldown on this. No cooldown. So every time you press Q and then you press W, you're getting 105 extra healing. Wow. That is insane. I mean, just look at, like, if you're, especially in the laning phase, and you're just, like, healing one extra person, I mean, your base heal, if this is, like, level 3, I mean, 105 healing is almost the equivalent, it's almost double what you would heal somebody else. Now, yes, you're healing yourself for this for 110, and then you're healing the other person for 110, but what you would heal the other person that you're trying to heal is almost doubled based off of that, because your heal is only 110 base, and then you get the extra plus 105, that takes it to 215. Now, yes, if you're shielding other people, we'll talk about the efficiency of this here in just a second. But I'm just saying, like, that is a massive amount of extra healing that's on no cooldown, basically. It's just the cooldown of your Q. So, like, every W is going to be almost twice as effective at healing a single target. And remember that this heal is also affected by plus healing and shielding. So if you have plus healing and shielding, it's going to improve this. If you take the revitalization, revitalize, I was going to say revitalization, which I guess that's a word, but revitalize the rune, then that's also going to affect this. So it doesn't have an AP ratio. Although the more AP you have, the more your Q is going to deal, and that will eventually cycle back to giving you more off of this passive. So it does kind of, in a convoluted way, have an AP ratio. And the stats are pretty good on it, right? You get the plus 20 ability power. Its baseline stats are 2543, so it's 115% gold efficient if you don't have any other items, if this is the only thing that you have. And then the passive on this also is you get an extra 5 ability power per 25% base mana regen. So if you have Frostfang, it's going to give you an extra 10 ability power. And if you pair this with Redemption, Redemption's going to give you an extra 30 ability power. So it starts to get pretty crazy. Like, after just a couple of items, just Frostfang plus Redemption, that's going to give you an extra 40 ability power. And this basically has a baseline of 50. So it's like a 90 ability power item for 2100 gold that also has this passive on it. Gives you mana regen, magic resist, cooldown reduction, and additional scaling as the game goes on. It's pretty hardcore. Like, that's a really, really nice item. So what this all means here in terms of the meta is that most of the other enchanters got nerfed. Sona didn't get hit by this. Sona did not have her heal or shield affected at all, but Lulu, Janna, Soraka... Soraka didn't directly have her heal affected, but she almost always has to get Mikhail's for the extra healing to compensate for her W, taxing her life. And Karma. So all of these champions... I may have said Karma twice there, but basically all the other enchanters got hit really hard. But because she didn't get directly hit, and her itemization doesn't have to include things like Mikhail's, right? She can go Athene's and then, something like Ardent Censer if she really wants to. Or she can go Athene's and Redemption. And yeah, you're going to lose 2% plus healing and shielding off of Redemption. But, or Ardent Censer, but that's fine. Because you get so much benefit off of Athene's. So that's really, really nice for Sona. So I think that has helped shift the meta. And then the game has slowed down recently. They gave extra shutdown gold, which is an anti-snowballing mechanic. Towers give less gold when you take them, which is anti-snowball. They have directly nerfed several assassins. They've buffed up several tanks. And so I think that we're kind of normalizing to where AD carries are coming back into style. Tanks are, especially going into the next patch, AD carries will definitely be back. They never left. I've had a lot of videos about that. It's just the kind of AD carries that are being played are different. It's just not Caitlyn. It's like Jhin, Misfortune, Draven, that type of stuff. But, yeah, and if the tanks are coming back, that means Sona's going to be one of the best high-scaling champs in the game. She's also pretty good against Nami because she outscales Nami. She has a lower cooldown W, which heals a lot more later on, and then her Q does a lot more work in terms of teamfight contributions as well. So she's pretty well positioned. Nami is one of the highest played champions, one of the highest win rate supports, and Sona's very good into that. So I think the meta is definitely aligning as of 8.14 going into 8.15 very, very well for Sona, especially if we start seeing some tanks again in the top and the jungle. It's going to be really, really good once team fighting comes back into style, which it is. But yeah, let's just talk just really quickly about just some of these numbers that she has, and then we'll get into strengths, weaknesses, and we'll talk about recommended items, runes, and then I'll talk about how you should play her in the laning phase and in team fights. Okay, so the thing you have to know about Sona is the more people that are around, the better. So she is designed to be a really strong team fight champion because of her auras. So her auras, I think, have like 450 range. It's not a super lot of range, so you have to be kind of in close in order to give everybody that aura. So it's always sort of tricky position-wise because you have to ask yourself, do I want to greed out and try to get it, like, stand really close to a lot of people with my W so that they all get the shield, or do I want to hang out further in the back, affect less people with the shield, but have better positioning in terms of, like, not getting hit by the enemy's area of effect stuff? So, like, Nami can hang out pretty far in the back. Someone like Janna can hang out really far in the back. But Sona's a little different because you have to make that choice positionally. But there are big rewards, if you can pull that off because her numbers are just so through the roof. I mean, if we look at her Q here, for example, when this is max rank, right? Or let's just even look at it rank 3, right? Because if you do 3 points of this and then 5 points in W, which is typically what you'll want to do, by level 10, then this is 100 damage. It's going to hit 2 people. That's 200 damage. And then each ally that you touch with this, let's say that you touch 3 allies with this, that's going to be 260 base damage. And then a 1.0 ratio here, you're affecting 3 allies, including yourself, so you and 2 other people, that's going to be an extra 90. So that's 190, a 1.9 AP ratio. That means if you have 100 ability power, it's going to do 190 extra damage. And that's an insane ratio for only 60 mana. Think of how efficient that is. That's crazy, right? So it's 260 base with a 1.9 ratio for only 60 mana. So that's giving you like 4-to-1 mana to damage payout in addition to having insane scaling. So that's very, very good for team fights, obviously. That's a ton of scaling in team fights. It's very good for taking Barons. It's very good for taking Dragons because you can just spam this and everybody's going to get all of that extra damage. So she actually shreds through like things like Dragons pretty quickly and Barons. For a support, at least, because if it's maxed out, it's going to be 360 or 320 plus 150 is going to be 470, and then it's going to have a 2.5 ratio. So 470 with a 2.5, that you can cast it doesn't have the cooldown on it here, but I'm pretty sure the cooldown is like 6 seconds, and then your crescendo lowers the cooldowns by a lot, by like 25% at level 11, and then you get an additional, whatever your CDR is, 40%. That's taxed multiplicatively, so it's not 65, but it's a lot. The cooldown is basically going to be like 3 seconds. So that's pretty insane. It's pretty insane value. And her W gets even crazier. So if we look at this, 200 damage at level 3, like I talked about earlier. You get a max of plus 150 if you're near 4 allies. That's 470 total if you tag everybody in a late game team fight with a 2.5 AP ratio. So, once again, if you have like 100 ability power, that's 250 extra damage. If you have 200 ability power, which with Athene's is not that hard to get to, if you get Athene's and then a couple other items like Athene's plus Ardent Censer plus Frostfang, you're probably there. Plus your runes. Then that give you 500 extra damage. So the numbers just start getting nutty. So that's like, 470 plus 500. That's almost 1,000 damage every time you cast a Q. It's really, really big. But then the W gets pretty wild as well. So these numbers don't look like a lot, right? Just 110 on 2 people. But that's 220 healing, pretty much, which is going to be on a fairly low cooldown. Then 125 shield per person. If you tag 5 people with this, that's 625 shield plus 210 base. It's like 835 total healing and shielding on a 3-second cooldown. This is a 50% ratio. All of these, if you tag everybody, that's a 1.5 ratio. That's a 2.0 ratio. That's 835 plus healing and shielding on a 2.5 ratio. What? What? So once again, if you have, or a 2.0 ratio. So if you have 100 ability power, it's an extra 200. That's over 1,000 plus healing and shielding if you just have 100 ability power. It's over 1,000 plus healing and shielding. If you have 200 ability power, then it's even more than that, right? It's like 1,200, 1,300. Which is crazy. And don't forget, that scales with not only AP, but plus healing and shielding, right? So if you have, 1,000, right, and then 1,000 healing, and you have 20% plus healing and shielding, that's an additional 200 plus healing and shielding. Compare this to like something like Janna's shield has a 10-second cooldown, whereas, and if you have 40% on Janna, I guess it goes to like a 6-second cooldown. But with Sona, this is going to be on like a 3-second cooldown. So Sona is roughly half the cooldown, and Janna's shield is single target 210 with a 0.7. So a Janna's shield on a single target with like 100 ability power is going to be 270 total shield. Whereas Sona's W on half the cooldown with 100 ability power, if you tag all 5 of your allies in a team fight, is going to be over 1,000. So it's like 4 times as strong in the neighborhood on half the cooldown. So it's just ridiculous. I mean, and a lot of people just don't do the math on Sona. They don't understand this, but it's like insane. you're not going to lose a fight. Unless they blow you up instantly, if there's a fight that lasts longer than, 5 to 10 seconds, you win, basically. So if you have a strong tank line, it's just almost impossible, unless you get picked by an assassin, to ever lose a fight, because the numbers just get ludicrous. And that doesn't include the extra healing that you're getting off of Athene's as well, cycling through all this stuff. So her numbers are just through the roof. She's the best team fight support in the game as far as healers go. Like, I think it's difficult to argue that. I mean, I guess somebody in the chat's going to say, but what about this or that? It's like, yeah, I don't know, man. If you're just sitting there having a heal off and fighting, I mean, Soraka can do pretty well too, right? But hers is single target. So yeah, she can single target heal people for like, on a maybe a 1.5 second cooldown, a 2 second cooldown, something like that. Maybe she can single target heal people for 250 a pop, but it costs her a lot of health and it's only single target. Now, she has an ult that heals everybody for a lot. I mean, Soraka heals for a ton as well. But I'm just saying that that's really strong. And obviously, the ability to touch everyone with this aura, give everyone a shield, well, that just works perfect with Ardent Sensor, because it gives everyone on your whole team Ardent Sensor permanently in a fight, which back in the Ardent Sensor meta was a really big deal. But Ardent is still pretty good. I mean, it's not nearly as strong as it was, but is still pretty strong. You can also speed people up, for somewhere between 10 to 14%. It's okay. It's nice. And then her ultimate, I think, is 140 second cooldown. It's kind of annoying. It doesn't have the cooldown on it listed here, but it's a decent cooldown. And it does okay damage. Can basically stun everyone in a team fight for 1.5 seconds. So if you hit 2 or 3 people with this in a fight, you probably just won the fight. So she has multi-target, hard stunned, 1.5 seconds, does pretty respectable damage with her Q in fights across, multiple targets, takes Barons quickly, takes Dragons quickly, and has a W healing and shielding that's just like through the roof, insanely powerful. Now, so there's that. That's kind of the good stuff about Sona. That's why she's really, really strong, especially in a team fight meta. I mean, she is coming back. Like, she's not going to... People may not even see her as a secret right now, but I think she kind of is, because they don't have her rated very highly. And, I mean, she's creeping. People aren't playing her very much right now, but she is really good. I've started playing her. She's very good in Anami. They're just about to nerf Fiddlesticks, Morgana, and Tom Kench pretty soon as well, which would be pretty good for Sona. Fiddlesticks in particular is pretty annoying, because it's really hard to harass him down in lane just because he pushes so fast. And if he gets on you with that fear, you're probably going to die. So Fiddlesticks is kind of annoying to deal with, because you have no way to like push him back or neutralize him like a Janna or something if he tries to ult in. So we'll see. But yeah, I think the meta is definitely shifting in her direction. So she has pretty good poke early on. Not to mention all these things you can spam, like with your Q in lane. Every time you Q somebody, it triggers Frostfang, it triggers Airy, and if Scorch is up, it triggers Scorch. So yeah, all of those things have been nerfed, but they still all add up. They do quite a bit of damage. And does it say ranges here? It does say range. Okay. So usually you'll want to auto attack whenever you do your Q, but you don't have to. I mean, if it's really dangerous for you to go up and auto, you can still get triggers of Frostfang and Scorch if you just walk up and Q. If like there's a Jhin or something sitting on his 4th shot, you can still hit him from 825 away with this. It's nice if you get that auto attack in there, but sometimes even if you can't get it, you can still get those Frostfang stacks, which is pretty good. Decent healing in lane. Awesome scaling, awesome team fight. It's very difficult to beat her late game, once she gets a couple of items. She is very squishy, though. She does not have any escapes. She's relatively slow. She has, like, 325 base move speed, I think. I don't know if it's going to say her... Yeah, 325 base. Now, she can speed up a little bit with her E, but she's really squishy. She has some of the lowest base stats in the game. So if they get on her, they're probably going to kill her. She doesn't have much CC outside of her ult, which is on, like, a medium-ish cooldown at 140. So she's very susceptible to assassins. It's perfectly respectable if they have something like, I think, like a Zed or a Talon or something to take barrier. People have been doing that with Soraka for a while. And I think that's reasonable with Sona too, because it's the same philosophy as basically like if you don't die, you win the fight. Basically, and everyone's going to be aiming for you, and that's why people started taking barrier on Soraka. You also get quite a bit of plus healing and shielding, so barrier scales pretty well. If your AD carry wants to take barrier, or if they want to take teleport or something, if it's like Ezreal, then you could go heal in theory as well. But usually, like, you'll go barrier. You can talk to your AD carry about doing... The reason that AD carries usually do heal is so they can maybe run people down for that extra 1 second, or they can use that to, like, get away. But technically, I think it's smarter for the support to have the heal because they scale with plus healing and shielding and revitalize and all of that kind of stuff. But a lot of people just don't do that. But either way, I think barrier's a legitimate option. Although, you know, Ignite, if you're going to have kill pressure, if you have a Draven or a Jhin or something like that, you'll still want to take Ignite. And then Exhaust is another option that's decent later in the game if they have Assassins with, like, you know, delayed damage or something. Like, I guess Zed would be a good candidate maybe to Exhaust. But Exhaust is on a longer cooldown than Barrier also. Just depends. Barrier is really strong early on. If you think you're going to be doing a lot of all-in fights, Barrier is very, very good. Early as well. But, yeah, those are some of her downsides. Now, as far as, like... Well, we'll talk about trading in lane near the end here. And I'll talk about, like, the correct way to trade, because a lot of people don't use her heal correctly, and it costs a lot of mana if you don't do it correctly, because it costs 80 mana at the first base. But we'll talk about that near the end of the video, just so we all have it, you know, partitioned off for the timestamps when I show you how to position in lane, how to trade, and all that stuff here in a few minutes. Recommended runes, I think pretty much you have to go Aerie, Mana Flow, Scorch. That's pretty standard. You definitely need the mana. She's insane with Aerie. You can trigger it so much in lane so easily with your Q. And then Scorch is the same way. It's just really good early pressure. Like, she would scale with Gathering Storm extremely well. So maybe if you're, like, in an impossible lane or something, if it's, like, you pick Sona early and your AD carries Ezreal, and then they have, like, Draven, Leona, or something like that, and there's just absolutely no way you're going to stick any meaningful harass on them, because Draven's going to have lifesteal early, and if you ever step up, they're just going to destroy you. Then maybe you could take Gathering Storm. She does scale very well with AP, extremely well with AP, so. But she's also really good early, so it's kind of a toss-up. But I think most of the time you should take Scorch. But if you know you're going to get crushed in lane, and you just want to play for the mid to late game, I think Gathering Storm could be reasonable. I think Absolute Focus is decent just because you heal yourself when you heal other people. Unless you're going to be taking a ton of extra harass, I think Absolute Focus is pretty strong. That'll give you a lot of extra damage early on. They also nerfed Celerity quite a bit to where it only gives you 1.5% move speed, which is really low. I mean, that's like basically like 5 extra move speed, 5 or 6 extra move speed with a 325 base. And yeah, you do get a little bit of extra AP if you like use your E to gain some extra move speed. I mean, you might gain like 5 or 10 AP or something situationally. It's not going to be that much. So I think an Absolute Focus, especially if you can harass them a lot early on, I think Absolute's probably a pretty good option. They buffed that fairly recently too, I think, within like the last 4 or 5 patches. And then secondaries, I think you have to have Bone Plating. That's just too strong. It gives you so much extra damage mitigation. You can take Chrysalis as well if you're in a tough lane against, you know, once again, like a Leona, Zyra, Brand, something like that's going to do a lot of damage. You can take Chrysalis as well, but Revitalize is amazing on her because you're going to be doing so much healing, you know, off of your W's, off of Athene's procs. If you get Redemption, it affects Redemption. So Revitalize is very, very good on any champion that can spam heals. So I would definitely try to fit Revitalize in your build. And that's pretty much it. I think you have to have the defensive runes. You might see some people go something like Stopwatch Footwear, Stopwatch Cosmic Insight, or something like that. I think that's too greedy. I think you have to get at least some form of defense there. As far as itemization, most of the time you'll want to take Frostfang, except in the most impossible of impossible lanes, just because it's so easy to trigger. You know, just by pressing Q, you're going to be tagging people. Also, because you're going to be getting Athene's, the extra 50% flat mana regen that you get off of this translates over into an additional 20 AP, or 10 AP rather. So that's a really nice conversion cost. I mean, 10 AP is an extra 200 gold worth of value. So that right there is a really, really nice interaction. And then also, not only are you going to be able to get the gold, but you're going to be triggering that extra damage for even more harass off of the Frostfang. So sometimes Frostfang on champions can be bad because you're not going to be able to land a lot of harass. It's too dangerous if your AD carry doesn't follow up. And you might just want coin just to have a lot more gold in the mid game. But because Sona can trigger it so easy on people, even in the mid game, you can hit people with some Qs, like max range Qs, just to get a couple extra Frostfang procs in there if you need to. So I think that Frostfang is almost always what you want to go, especially if you're going to get Athenes, which you should get early on. If you're in a super impossible lane with nomads and you just really want to farm it out, I guess you can get coin, but she's one person I think definitely Frostfang. Then Athenes, we talked about that a ton. Athene's is so good, not only because of its interaction with your Q and your W, which is great, but like the build path to it is awesome because if you're ahead, you can get an Amp Tome early, and that really allows you to start cranking up that damage and apply some major pressure. So if you get an early kill, or even if you force an unfavorable back for the enemy and you have an advantage, like your AD carry has a BF sword and the enemy has a pick or something, you can do a lot with that Amp Tome. It's a lot of extra damage. And then it also has 100% mana regen as its base, which is really, really sweet because Sona does have some mana problems early on. I highly recommend not going tier. I know that some Sonas have gone tier in the past. They nerfed tier pretty heavily a few patches ago. 850 gold is a lot more than 750 to a support. 100 gold is a big deal. And it doesn't build into anything meaningful. You're probably not going to be able to stack it up all the way to Seraphs or whatever or Archangels until like really, really late in the game. So you can get it, but you're just basically wasting 850 gold, I think, just to have infinite mana. And I think if you just go with Athenes and you're a bit more discerning with your mana usage, then you don't need to get that 850 gold. So you don't need to invest that 850 because the 850 gold, that's like a third of a support item or less. Like, that's a lot. So that could be the difference between you having a completed Athenes at 13 minutes versus you having a completed Athenes at like 21 minutes. So I think it's a really, really bad idea to go tier. But it also feels bad to go Ardent Censer first item because it only gives 50% mana regen on it, which is just not enough for Sona. Like, she has to have a good chunk of mana regen. And this only has 50%, but that's why you can go with Athenes early. So you get the 100% mana regen, you still get the extra damage that Ardent Censer gives, which is great. And once you complete it, it gives you that huge amount of extra healing. So it's just really good all around. If you do need the extra mana regen, you can also go ahead and get a couple of Fairy Charms early. So the build path is really nice. You get Fairy Charms, you get Amp Tome. The completed product is excellent, gives you the mana regen, gives you the damage. Awesome passive, scales really well. So then once you're getting your extra Fairy Charms, you're working towards redemption. Not only does it give you the extra mana regen, but every Fairy Charm is going to give you an extra 5 ability power too, which doubles the gold value of Fairy Charm, basically, because ability power is, basically pretty close to 22 gold per. Getting 5 ability power is 110 gold worth of value. Fairy Charm only costs 125 for the mana regen. So you're basically getting like double value out of the Fairy Charm, pretty close, if you complete Athenes as you're building other items and collecting these Fairy Charms. So I think that it's just really good to start with that because it scales with everything else that you're doing, and it's just really nice build path, really good power spike. It's just awesome. So I think this is a huge part of why Sona has been rising in win rate quite a bit, is because of that item. And then I think Redemption is pretty good from there, so I would almost always go Athenes first in the current meta. If your AD carry is super far ahead, you can still go Ardent Censer. Everyone's pretty familiar with Ardent Censer, I think. Just a boatload of really useful stats. So even just all of these raw stats, it's a 2,300 gold item. It's 2,800 gold worth of value. So it's 121% efficient. So on paper, it's more than Athenes. But remember that they don't quantify the extra 105 healing that you get, which, if we want to try to quantify that, obviously it's not exactly what it was, but plus healing and shielding used to be 35 gold each. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but you're basically getting like at least 50% extra healing out of it. So like 50 times 35, you're getting 1750 gold out of that, sort of. Now, obviously, like, that healing doesn't apply to redemption. It doesn't apply to a lot of stuff. But I'm just saying, like, that passive is worth a lot of gold. It's worth somewhere in the neighborhood of, 50% extra plus healing and shielding is what it's going to put out. So, it does scale with other plus healing and shielding too. So it's really, really valuable. That's all I'm saying. Is Athene's on paper doesn't look like it's as cost efficient as Ardent, but the way that it interacts with Sona, it really is. But Ardent is definitely still super strong. The thing is that the last round of nerfs on Ardent, like, the base amount is pretty low. So it's only 5 extra on hit damage and 10% attack speed, which is still good, but it's nowhere near the 25% attack speed and 20%, or 20 on hit damage that it used to give, in addition to the 20 healing that it used to give on hit. It was just crazy back in its heyday. It still is really strong, though. Keep in mind that this gives you no defensive stats whatsoever, also. Nothing. No magic resist, no armor, no health, nothing. So you are super, super squishy if you go Censor. So you better make sure they don't have a hyper-fed assassin. Whereas Athene's at least gives you some magic resist, right? It gives you 30 magic resist, which is like, okay, But yeah, you can go Ardent Censor next, especially if your AD carries really far ahead, especially if you have multiple people that benefit from Ardent Censor. So if you have like a Master Yi on your team, or a Kindred who's really popular right now on your team, she'll benefit a lot from that extra attack speed. So Ardent's definitely a pretty good choice. Kind of the safer choice for team fights is Redemption. Now, Redemption doesn't have a ton of defense either, but at least it's got some health on it, right? It's got like 200 health. So it does give you a bit more survivability. That 150% mana regen translates over into 30 extra ability power, which is really, really nice if you have Athene's first. And then it also just gives you, just a really nice cooldown and heal. Your team starts a fight, you just go ahead and drop a Redemption, huge heal, scales very well with Revitalize, also has 5,500 range. So it gives you some semi-global pressure there. I don't know why my hair is freaking out here. That gives you some semi-global pressure. So if you're still trying to fight bot lane or whatever, and mid lane they decide to start a fight for whatever reason, you can just throw your Redemption over there, and sometimes that makes a big difference. So I still think Redemption's really strong, and Sona is just a huge mana hog. Not only does it give you a lot of extra ability power by having 150% mana regen, but she'll use it. Sona will use that mana regen. She is one of the most mana hungry champions in the game, so having that extra mana regen is good for a ton of different reasons. So in a lot of games, this is what I'll typically get. The order can vary a little bit. You could do Censor before Redemption. I think Athene's almost always first is a good idea, but these are sort of the core items I would get most of the time. If they have a ton of like really hard CC, you might want to go Mikhail's somewhere in there. It's not entirely an awful thing if you go Athene's and Mikhail's. Like, you don't get the extra healing off of Mikhail's, but you still get the active, which gives you the cleanse, and then you still get 100 mana regen off of it, which translates over into 20 extra ability power. So it's decent. Do you want to do it all the time? Probably not, but it's okay. It's okay. So that's something that you could get. It is really nice with Redemption because you get triple value of the plus healing and shielding. But most of the time you want to go Athene's first. But if they, if you pick Sona like second pick and then they end up picking something like Morgana, Ashe, Lysandra, or something like that, then Mikhail's might be a pretty good option for you. Zeke's is something that you don't actively want to get, but you might have to get sometimes. So I say that because Sona is very squishy, and especially if they have an AD assassin like a Zed or a Talon or something like that, and they get a couple of kills, you are going to be very high up on their priority list to kill. So you might need to get a Zeke's, because Zeke's does give you 60 armor. Now, Sona can hold people still, right, with her ultimate, so that when you get your Zeke's proc on your ally, they are going to be able to sit there and hit them. It's a medium, medium CD ultimate, so you're going to be able to cast it a healthy amount of times. You get the extra armor out of it. Now, it doesn't have any mana regen on it. It has flat mana, so it does not synergize like super well with your Athenes. And obviously, you don't want to stand close enough to use the active portion on you most of the time. The thing that does the little fiery storm around you, it does damage per second. You're not going to make good use of that. But it's just the best. If you need 60 armor, it's just going to be the best option that you can get most of the time. Like, you could do something like a Knight's Vow also. But Zeke's does synergize well with Ardent Censer. So the fact that, because the Ardent Censer gives them that extra attack speed, which means they're going to be hitting with the Zeke's more and getting that Zeke's trigger more. So I think it's just the best armor item if you have to get one for a non-tank. Like I said, you could do something like a Knight's Vow also if you wanted to, but you're only going to get half value out of that. It's only going to be 6% damage mitigation. So it's okay. I just feel like Zeke's is something that's interesting. At least it's relatively cheap. It gives you CDR. It does give you some mana, but I don't know. Maybe Knight's Vow would be better. Knight's Vow does have armor plus health on it. But Zeke's is an option if you really need it. Locket is another option that's there. You know, you could go Athene's Redemption Locket. That's a decent build. If you don't have a traditional AD carry, if you have like a Swain bot lane, or if your AD carry just doesn't scale very well with like attack speed, like maybe it's a Jhin or a Misfortune or something like that, you know, you might want to go Locket. Or if they have a lot of damage in a team fight, like they have a Brand or something, you might want to get Redemption Locket. So that's pretty reasonable. And then Shirelia's is okay. You know, it does have some health on it. It does have AP. The extra 100 mana regen does give you 20 extra AP on it. So, let me see if Shirelia's is going to show up. Yeah, here we go. So it's still pretty good. They did raise the price on it. You know, it is going to have 60 ability power, which is good. It does give you the movement speed. It's kind of a long cooldown. You know, if you have a team that can get kited really easily, so if you have something like like a Darius, Olaf, you know, just something like that, then Shirelia's might be a decent pickup. I don't think it scales as well as either Redemption, Athene's, or Ardent Censer, but it's okay in a pinch. It does give you a little bit of safety too, so you can run away if you need to. So I wouldn't get that most of the time, but it is on the table. And I just kind of spelled out some of these reasons that I already talked about here. You know, Athene's being really good with the buff because of the way that your spells cycle, your Q auto attacks. Now, the Q damage that you put on allies, so your empowered auto attack that you give allies, does not charge up Athene's. It's only the damage that you personally do. So it's not like insanely over the top, right? But it's pretty over the top. It's it's really, really strong. And then Redemption, like I said, has the nice range, great synergy with Athene's, just all around great utility item. Then Ardent Censer, great synergy with your W, so you can put it on everybody. Good AP scaling for the Q and the W, going Ardent plus Athene's gives you a ton of extra AP. So that's really nice. And then, like I said, Mikhail's in a pinch is okay. Zeke's if you really have to. I didn't mention Knight's Vow, but that's another option instead of Zeke's if you want to do that instead. Particularly if your AD carry is not doing that well, you might consider Ardent Censer to buff up one of your tanks or assassins. You know, if that person's not going to benefit from the Zeke's on-hit damage that well. And then Shirelian's is okay sometimes. Yeah, Olaf, Shyvana, Nasus, those type of things. So some of the better matchups for her, for Sona, would be Braum, Tahm Kench, Janna, Ezreal. These champions don't do a lot early in the game. You can bully them out pretty hard early on, and they don't really blow people up quickly later in the game either. And so usually if the enemy has these types of champs, then the fights are going to be pretty long, and that's great for Sona because they don't really have a good way to get on her. Something that's kind of tough early on would be like Misfortune, Jhin, Draven. Unfortunately, all three of those are pretty popular right now. They are lane bullies. She's good with them. A little weaker against them because they can hit her really hard. But, you know, if you take bone plating and you're getting some pretty good trades in there, depending on who their support is, then, you know, you could do all right. And then tough matchups for her, or that's who she's good with. She's also not that great against those champions. She wants, those slow farm up type of champs to be against. Tough matchups, things that can catch her and blow her up in lane. So like Leona is probably the worst nightmare. You do not want to see Leona at all if you're playing Sona. Like Alistar is pretty rough too. Zyra can be rough if you get caught by the root, but you can heal through some Zyra stuff. But yeah, in general, you don't want to see Zyra, Draven, Jhin. You might be able to play around Pike. You might be able to play around Thresh or Blitz if you can dodge hooks and things like that. But in general, because you have such low movement speed, those like skill shot, if they hit you, you're dead type of things are usually pretty good against Sona because she has no like way to get around them. All right, as far as like positioning and trading, and then we'll go ahead and end the video. I don't want it to be longer than an hour. A lot of this depends on where, like, what your matchup is and where the jungler is. But in general, whenever they try to go up to last hit a minion, you need to go up and Q them and auto attack and do as much damage as possible. Now, pay attention to the size of the minion wave as well. If they have a huge stacked up minion wave, like maybe you only have 5 minions, they have like 10, you need to be very careful with that because the minions will hit you back whenever you auto attack. So try to go for those trades when the wave is thin, when there's only a few CS left on the wave. It's okay. You can do it on a thicker wave if the waves are about even. You just want to make sure that you back up whenever you do that. You want to be sort of near the edge here if possible, especially if they don't have this warded. Go up, and their 80 carries here. Try to get an auto attack Q, and then fade back into the bush. Whenever you go into the bush, the minions will lose aggro on you, so that's pretty helpful. Just keep trying constantly. Every time they step up to that wave, go for that Q auto, and try to wait specifically for when they go for that last minion hit, because then they have to choose. Are they going to hit you, or are they going to hit the minion, right? Because they get one auto attack. So if they hit you, then they lose the minion. If they hit the minion, then they take free hits. So that's kind of how you want to do it, and just keep trading like that over and over again with your Q. If it's really dangerous, like if this is a Leona or something like that, then maybe you just come over here and just, keep poking them with the Q and then backing up, staying out of Leona's range. At least that'll hit them with the Q, Scorch, and Airy every now and then. Frostfang procs. So you'll still put in some decent damage, even if you can't auto, but obviously you want to try to auto for that empowered auto attack and for the power cord damage. Now, something that I was mentioning earlier, people don't use the W right in lane often. So a major component of the W, it's actually pretty strong even at early levels, but you have to use it correctly. If you're just casting W just to heal one person for 30, that's awful. You're paying 80 mana for a 30 heal. That's why it feels like for a lot of people that her W is very cost inefficient, because they use it in an inefficient way. But you want to make sure that you're getting full use out of this shield, right? So you get a 25 shield. So the best way to do this is you want to be using the W in trades. So when you go up and auto attack with your Q, if they're going to hit you back, if their support hits you back, or they are going to decide to hit you instead of the minion, then you want to use your W. Because not only is it going to heal you, but then at least you're getting some of that shield as well. Right? So then at a minimum, you're getting a 55 value out of it versus a 30. The best thing to do is tell your 80 carry to be aggressive as well, and then while both of you are trading, so when you both go up to auto attack them, and they're going to trade back on both of you, and you both have some damage on you, then you use that W, and all of a sudden you're getting, a 60 heal, 30 on you, 30 on your ally, and then a 50 shield that gets used. That's 110 total, right? 50, 60, 110. So that's still not amazing. 80 mana for 110 worth of healing and shielding. That's a hell of a lot better than only getting 30. Now, this gets better as you go up. Obviously, 100 mana here for 210, and then in a team fight, once you get to that 1,000, effective healing and shielding that we talked about for 100 mana, well, that's actually quite cost efficient. But it's just early on, it can be a little rough. So you really don't want to just spam your W if people are just marginally hurt. You want to make sure that that both of you have damage on you, ideally, and also that you are actively in combat when you take that. So they're shooting you with something, so you can take advantage of the shield plus the heal. And that's something that so many people don't do. I see so many Sonas just sit back and chill, and then if they have a little bit of damage on them, but their AD carries full health, they'll just sit there and use their heal without trying to use the shield at all. So, sometimes your AD carry won't play along, they won't be aggressive at all, and you're just going to have to use it. Or they take a really terrible trade, and they're at like 10% health sitting at the tower, you might just have to use it, in that inefficient way. You should actively be thinking, how can I do this more efficiently? Can I wait until we both have sustained damage and when I'm actively in combat? So that's one of the biggest things about trading, is just wait on that. Other thing in like team fights, you want to be using the green power cord as much as possible. Sometimes the Q1 is okay if you want to do some extra damage, but the green one often is going to be the best one. I don't think it tells you on this page what it does, but it basically reduces the incoming damage, or reduces the damage that champion does by like 25% for 2 seconds. It's something like that. I don't remember the exact numbers, but that's a really big deal. If you can power cord their assassin that's coming in, you power cord that Talon before he does his combo, or you green power cord the Vayne who just tumbled in and is trying to kill your tank. That could be really nice. So just pay attention to which power cord you need. The blue one obviously does quite a bit of damage, extra damage. The W one is usually the best. It reduces damage by a ton. It's basically like putting exhaust on them. So every 3 spells you get a free exhaust if you use it correctly. And then the E slows them down quite a bit. So just think carefully about which power cord you want to use. I think too many times people just start rolling their hand across the keyboard, as Sona in a fight, just QW, 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 and just auto attack whatever's close. And they don't think about like, okay, what am I going to do with this power cord? Now, sometimes you don't need to. If it's late game and you have 3 items in your Sona and the fight goes 10 seconds, you're just going to win just by spamming W and just auto attacking the closest target most of the time. But, sometimes it really does matter quite a lot. So, if you blue power cord that Zed that just ulted your AD carry instead of green power cording them, well, that can be a really big deal. That could be the difference in life or death, and could even determine the game, right? If your AD carry gets picked really early on in a late game team fight, that's going to be really rough. Just keep that in mind. And then, you're going to be harassing them a lot, and so it's naturally going to push the lane a lot of the time. So because their minions are going to turn and start hitting you instead of hitting your minions. And so your minions are going to get a health advantage on them, because your minions are going to keep hitting them. Or your minions hit their minions do not hit your minions because they're hitting you instead whenever you auto. And so that's going to make the wave push. So just make sure that that's a good idea. In solo queue, I think the best position you can be in is to push them under tower, but don't die to a gank. This is the best situation a lot of times, because a lot of AD carries can't last hit very well under tower. This puts incremental damage on the tower, and it gives you lane priority, so if you need to go over here to fight for a scuttle, or your jungler wants to invade for, a blue or something like that. I've talked about this a lot in my macro video. I'm not going to go into it right now, but I think Sona, just like most other champs, if you can get the priority on the wave, you can also harass them with Q while they're trying to last hit. You just need to make sure you have really good ward coverage, and that good places to ward. If you're here, it'd be here. If you can go deep enough, there, it can be pretty good. Just make sure that your mid isn't getting pushed in. So if they have, and I'm guilty of not watching this as much as I should sometimes too, but if they have a Talon mid and they're against a Diana, they push her in and then just, zip right down here, blast plan over, and then, come at you. You got to make sure that doesn't happen. So make sure you have good ward coverage. Keep track of the minimap. Watch where the jungler is. If you can play up like this and harass them under the tower, then you're going to get some big advantages over time. So Sona's a pretty good blend of early game aggression and late game scaling, but she's super squishy, so you do not want to get caught out to ganks. So I think that's it as far as the Sona guide goes. So, just to recap really quickly, runes, you pretty much always want to go Airy. Airy, Mana Flow, Scorch is pretty standard. I like Absolute Focus, but a lot of people still go Celerity. You could go Transcendence as well. That translates late game, so that you can get more AP out of your CDR if you go over the cap. That's pretty nice. but it doesn't give you anything in the early game. So all three of those are viable in different situations, I think. Then I would highly recommend Bone Plating and then something else, probably Revitalize. You will see some Cosmic Insights out there. I don't really like Inspiration here. I think you're just too squishy. I guess I could see like Domination. Like you could go into Domination and get like Poro plus Ingenious Hunter or Poro plus Ultimate Hunter. The problem with like Ingenious Hunter is that as Sona, you're almost always going to want to do Athene's early, which is not an item active, so you don't get any benefit out of Ingenious there other than your sweeper. And Ardent is also another really popular item. It's going to be in your first 3 core items a lot of times, so you don't benefit off of that as much as you might with other champs. So I would probably stay out of Domination also, and it's just going to make you too squishy. So I think this is pretty much what you should take most of the time, with, you know, Absolute being has the most wiggle room if you still want to go Celerity. And then items, like I said, I feel like Athene just is a perfect item. Pretty much has great components, has a great passive once you complete it, very flexible, and just synergizes so well with Sona's kit that it's crazy not to get this item, especially after the buff and the nerfs to other items. And then I think that Redemption and Ardent should probably be your other items because all of those work so well in conjunction with Athene's. Then situationally, if you need it, you could go Mikhail's, Knight's Vow, or Zeke's in some situations. Yeah, and that's it. And just, you know, try to hang out, you know, try not to be too greedy in fights. Make sure you don't die. That's the number one priority. But touch as many people as you can with your auras. Spam your Q whenever it's up. Spam your W. But watch that power cord. Try to hit the green power cord on people as much as you can. Just with your ult, it's tough to say exactly how you should use that in every situation. But ideally, you want to be hitting multiple targets if you can. And if you can get one single key target, then do that. Now, obviously, if they have like a, you know, an 8-0 Talon and he's rolling in, obviously hit the Talon instead of the 2 tanks if you have a choice. But a lot of times hitting multiple targets is better than hitting a slightly higher priority single target. But it just takes some practice to figure out when you should do those different things. But yeah, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. So Sona, I think she is climbing up. She's definitely pretty strong. She's under the radar right now, though a lot of people aren't picking her as much. But I think once the tanks start coming back in full swing a little bit, AD carries start coming back into play, the traditional AD carries, right? You know, once we start seeing some more Caitlyn's, we are seeing more Jinxes, Tristanas, things like that, then she's going to get a little bit stronger in those scenarios. But that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this content, like, subscribe. Come check out the stream sometime around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Come check out the tier list. Check out other guides. Got a lot of stuff on the channel for you. So thanks. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.